So this phone is, of course, a low-end Android device, and so it ships with a 600 megahertz processor. Now, numbers don't always tell the whole story on performance, which is why you watch a review, so I can tell you how it performs. Overall, performance is decent. Yes, there is lag and it's slow in pretty much everything that it does, but it's not as bad as other phones that I've tested out in this category with a similar processor. It is still pretty smooth, with certain everyday functions, and the lag is not too bad as long as you're expecting, okay, this is a low-end device, it's not going to be zippy with everything that it does, kind of keep your standards reasonable, then I think it'll be okay. I'm going to do a quick quadrant standard test and just show you guys how it scores. I've also downloaded another CPU benchmark app that I'll use since some people prefer something besides a quadrant standard score. So while this is going through the test, I'll talk a little bit more about the processor. So 600 megahertz, I've tested low-end phones with 600 megahertz processors that were terrible and slow and laggy, and then I've tested low-end phones with 600 megahertz processor that were very fast, little to no lag, were very smooth. This is about in the middle. Yes, there is some lag, but overall, it wasn't too bad. Just a couple of delays here and there. Pinch to zooming whenever you're web browsing, that's where you're going to notice it more, which we'll talk about whenever we get onto web browsing. That's where you're really going to notice it when you do the pinch to zoom. So I'll show you guys that after we take a look at these scores. Okay, so we have the scores, and we have an 801, so kind of about the middle of the pack, but this actually isn't extremely accurate because we have several new devices like the Photon and the Sensation, and the Droid Charge are probably going to be way above these. So this is going to be a little bit lower once you consider all those devices. But 801, that's the score that you get, and then we'll go to Benchmark Pi, and we'll see the results that we get from this test, and we'll do a quick benchmark to see how long it takes to calculate pi, and we get 5,400, and the average time is about 4,000. So it took a little bit longer than the average time. So again, a low-end device, but being just that much under the average time, that's really not bad. So those are a few quick quadrant standard tests. Now I mentioned web browsing, so we'll get on to that. This is a 3G device. You can see the 3G symbol up in the top corner. It does, of course, support Wi-Fi, so you can use Wi-Fi. Now, in terms of 3G speeds, I'll show you guys my 3G speed tests, but a lot of that is going to depend on coverage in your area, how AT&T performs the area you're in. But we'll get on to that in just a second. So here's PhoneDog.com, and right now I have all plugins turned off or set to on demand. So you can see there's no ads, no flash content is loaded. So everything is pretty smooth. It is kind of choppy. It's not completely smooth, but you see it's not too bad. It does zoom in and out pretty well. Now if I go and turn on, see, enable JavaScript, enable plugins, and then if I were to go back and refresh this page, then the performance would be a lot worse and a lot choppy. So, obviously it is going to be wiser to have, or more wise to have flash and certain plugins turned off. But if you don't want to do that, or if you don't want to make that sacrifice, then the performance is going to be dramatically decreased because, like I said, that 600 megahertz processor, it just can't handle that much. And so that's what I was talking about when I was doing that benchmark test. The pinch to zoom is going to be not very good. It's going to be a lot slower and a lot more choppy. So we'll wait for PhoneDog to load here. Okay, so here we have PhoneDog.com, and now you can see I do have plugins loaded. So scrolling is a little bit more choppy, and then pinch to zoom sometimes. It's not too bad, but you can see it does take a little while to respond, and then it gets kind of confused. So, you know, definitely it could be worse, but as you can see, you know, it's a low-end device. So that's what you can expect if you're just determined to have flash turned on. I would recommend having it turned off, but even then, you know, you saw the scrolling was a little choppy. So going back to the 3G speeds, I'll show you my speed test results. I'm in the Dallas area. So coverage is generally pretty good, especially when you're in a metropolitan area. So I have a couple of tests here. You can see they're a little bit inconsistent. So I have, you know, mostly it's, you know, 1.4, I have, you know, 1.5, 1.7 down. But I also have a test, you know, with 451 down. So, you know, a little bit inconsistent, and then my upload speeds have been hovering around 300 to 330 kilobits per second. So for me, 3G speeds have actually been pretty decent, you know, 1.5, 1.7, that's pretty good. But again, it's going to depend on coverage in your area. For me in Dallas, AT&T is usually pretty good, but I do have times when it is inconsistent like this. So you can check out some coverage maps and maybe see how that works out for you. Now, I'll talk a little bit about the camera now on the back. It's a 3 megapixel camera. As you can see, it doesn't have a flash, but it does have an autofocus. So, you know, personally, on smartphones, I like to see something better than a 3 megapixel camera, simply because, you know, most messaging phones, you need a feature phone with a 3 megapixel camera, so you would expect something better than that on a smartphone. However, you know, my opinion at this point doesn't really matter to cell phone manufacturers. So 3 megapixel camera is what you get. At least you have an autofocus though, which actually does help. So I'll go over to the gallery and show you guys a couple of test pictures that I've taken. And you know, you may not be able to see all the details, you know, coming from the camera and watching the video, but color saturation is actually pretty good. Now, obviously, you know, being 3 megapixels, whenever we zoom up, you can see that it does get kind of blurry. And I'll go to another picture here, and we'll zoom in. You know, it does get kind of blurry, but the nice thing is that it's not grainy. And so for me personally, you know, even though it's not very detailed, I'm willing to deal with the blurriness as long as it's not grainy. I'm having some problems with, this is what I was talking about before with the pinch to zoom. That's where you really notice that the screen is plastic and kind of sometimes is not as smooth as it should be. But anyway, so like I was saying, the pictures are blurry, again, which is to be expected with a 3 megapixel camera, but as long as it's not grainy and the color saturation is decent, I'm actually very impressed with this camera. So you can see a couple of pictures here. This is a picture taken with normal lighting, with just, you know, an overhead light on this, or ceiling light on. This is with low lighting, with a dark room and just one small light in the background. So you can see it actually captured everything pretty well. And then this is with ideal lighting with a couple of lights on it. So you know, overall, even in low light situations, pictures are pretty decent. Here we have a close-up shot. I can zoom in. So, you know, it does get kind of blurry once you zoom in, but again, not having a grainy picture, to me, that's the most important thing. So those are just quick sample pictures. Overall, I am impressed by the camera. You know, obviously you're going to have to have reasonable expectations with a 3 megapixel camera, but for me, I think to a certain extent it exceeded my expectations, so I'm very impressed by the camera. It doesn't have a front-facing camera, obviously. You know, this is a low-end smartphone. The rear-facing camera here does capture video, VGA quality video, so, you know, pretty decent, 640 by 480. You know, obviously you probably won't use that for much except for, you know, quick videos that you're going to delete right after you watch them. And so, you know, video quality and audio quality wasn't that great, but pictures taken with the camera, I was definitely impressed by it. Now, if we go to the back here and I take off the battery cover, take a look at the battery. You can see the SIM card slot there. This is a micro SD card slot, and it ships with a 2 gig card. I had trouble getting this out in the unboxing video. So it ships with a 2 gig card, if you can see that. The phone supports up to 32 gigs of additional memory with this micro SD card slot. And then the phone itself has 138 megs of internal user available memory. Now it has more than that, but a lot of it's taken up with, you know, pre-installed apps and things like that. So 138 megs of available internal memory, and then having that 2 gig card definitely helps. So here's the battery, and it is a 1240 milliampere hour battery, so kind of small for an Android smartphone. You know, Android isn't the most battery efficient Android or operating system out there, just because of all the multitasking that you're going to be doing. So you know, battery life was not that great. On standby, it lasted a little over a full day, and it was at 25% after 30 hours. So, you know, one 24-hour day, and then a couple of hours after that, and it was at 25%. So a day and a half on standby isn't, you know, not great. And then once I started using it, the battery started draining, you know, pretty quickly. So Sharp's estimates are that you should get 3 hours max of talk time. So, you know, just on the phone continuously, it would last about 3 hours. So battery life really isn't that great. You may have to charge it once throughout the day, but you're definitely going to have to charge it every night, and that's going to depend, of course, on you know, usage, how much you use your phone and what you use it for. Now I do want to talk a little bit about, I have Advanced Task Killer installed, as you can see. Not everybody agrees with using a task manager on an Android smartphone. I agree that it's not always necessary, but with a phone with, you know, such a slow processor, 600 megahertz, it does sometimes come in handy. This is probably one of the phones where you will want to open it and make sure that you don't have a whole lot of apps open that you're not using. Now, certain apps like, you know, a Twitter app, that's just going to reopen right after you close it because you have notifications running in the background. Same thing if you had, like, you know, messaging, that's just going to reopen so that it continue to send you messages. But, you know, you can check and see, okay, I haven't used speed test in like an hour, I can close that, or the browser or the gallery, you know, I haven't used those in half an hour, so I can close that. With a phone like this, you're going to want to do that just so the processor doesn't get bogged down with a bunch of tasks that you're not really using. So I would recommend downloading a task manager if you buy the Sharp FX Plus. You don't have to use it every 5 seconds and kill everything, but there are going to be times when it comes in handy and you can kill some programs just so the processor can, you know, try to keep up with everything that you're doing, because you know, like I said, you already do have some lag, and it does slow down from time to time. So that's my recommendation, but everyone feels differently about task managers. So that is pretty much it, guys, with the Sharp FX Plus. Overall, this is a decent low-end Android smartphone. I'm going to say, though, that AT&T has better options. Even if you want a keyboard, you know, it's hard to find a decent Android smartphone with a keyboard, and this, of course, you know, is not a high-end phone by any means, you know, but it's hard to find with a keyboard. AT&T has a couple of other options, the Pantech Crossover and the HTC Status. Currently, taking all those phones into consideration, I would consider the HTC Status if you need a phone with a physical keyboard rather than the Sharp. To me, performance was better with the Status. If you don't need a physical keyboard, I would recommend looking at the LG Phoenix, which is AT&T's version of the Optimus One. That one also has similar specs. Again, it's a low-end phone, but it had better performance than the Sharp FX Plus. So the Sharp FX Plus is not the best low-end Android smartphone on AT&T, and I would, you know, consider looking into something else. That being said, if you really like this form factor, if you try out the keyboard and you think it's just one of the best keyboards you've used, it is still a decent phone. Keep in mind there's going to be some lag, more so than with other low-end phones that I've tested out, but it is still usable and it wasn't too frustrating, but you're just going to have to keep your standards reasonable. So there it is, the Sharp FX Plus from AT&T. Check it out, and keep it on PhoneDoc.com, because I'm going to be posting my written review of the Sharp FX Plus, where I'll have a couple of more details that I maybe didn't have time to get into in the video review, so keep a lookout for that. If you have any questions about the Sharp FX Plus or any other phone that I've reviewed, you can follow me on Twitter. My screen name is It's My Job to Know, so just send me a message and I'll try to answer the ones that I can. I can't get to all of them, but I'll try to answer as many as I can. Other than that, keep it on PhoneDoc.com for more news updates and reviews. I'm Sydney from PhoneDoc, and I'll see you guys later.